What's up, everybody? Mike Coluzzi here. Pro tips to grow your business. As you know, I am a business owner, entrepreneur, and business coach who helps people uncover their confusion and frustration, particularly associated with things like career transitions, which can be so overwhelming and frustrating to people as they move through their career. So you can find me at MikeColuzzi.com, or you could shoot me an email at mike@MikeColuzzi.com, and you could set up a free consult where we could talk about your situation and see how I may be able to help you through that process. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I am really excited to share a great podcast with a guy who I find really, really impressive, particularly in the world of online marketing, branding, and his own amazing podcast episodes that he puts through. So he is S.A. Grant, and he is coming live from, what part of Georgia are you from? Atlanta, Georgia. So S.A. is, just like I said, an amazing guy. Now, if you look at the backstory and you learn more about him, you'll see that, as he says in his bio, he is a recovering workaholic, which you find it impossible not to realize that he's still not a workaholic with the amount of output he puts out on a regular basis. But he had suffered through some personal adversity, some health challenges that made him have to refocus and retool his life, and he has turned himself around to make a better man for himself. He is the host of Boss Uncaged podcast. He is the CEO of Cerebral 360, a design and marketing agency, and Brand Growth Strategist Consultant with SA at sagrant.com. He has over 21 years experience to help aspiring business owners and entrepreneurs to create creative strategies so that you can create revenue, brand awareness, and a successful marketing strategy for your business. So S.A., thanks for being on the show today.
Well, the pleasure is mine, Mike. I mean, I think having you on my show, we getting to know each other over the past couple of months, it was definitely, I love when I have opportunity to return the favor and being on a guest's show. So I'm looking forward to this.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And like I was saying from the very beginning, I mean, SA has an amazing energy. You know, his website, bossuncaged.com. You go on his YouTube page, Boss Uncaged. You know, you're going to find just somebody who puts major attention to the detail, right? And it's so obvious. So SA, just like to kind of get right into it as far as letting people know, right? Particularly people who are contemplating, going out on their own, starting their own business, and looking into the world of entrepreneurship. Obviously, podcasting is a big, big component of that. Give people, really like an insider's view from a pro on what that looks like as far as the mechanics of putting it together, the time commitment, the planning. Share a little bit about your journey and some of that insight, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at it like, business is business, podcasting is podcasting, and it sounds very relative, but I mean, everything comes down to like these core principles, right? Creating a system. Like that's the first thing that I would say if you're going to do anything in business, if you have a system behind it, and then second to that is like, how do I automate that system? Then third after that is like obviously you want to make revenue, but primarily you need to figure out these things that way these dominoes will fall into place. Because if they don't fall into place, that's when you start hitting the hurdles. That's when you start getting the heart attacks and the strokes like I did. You start pulling out your hair because you're running yourself ragged. So first thing and foremost is find something that you love doing, systematize the hell out of it, and then automate it.
So when you talk about automation, is that something that you work with other people, or you do it internally amongst yourself? Share a little, more about that as far as how it plays out in your world.
So it's funny that you asked that. I mean, today I had a call with a client, right? And originally the client was looking for our general services. And, maybe 20 years ago, I would have jumped on it, but to just send out a regular estimate or invoice and be like, hey, let's start working. We have a team of VAs. We can do this work for you. But, over the years, I've just learned, like, usually when a client comes to you, they're just coming to you because they're just trying to get something done, but they really don't know what they want to get done. So as a growth strategist, what I've put into place is if you're familiar with the lean canvas model, and I put that in front of them, and I want them to start thinking, and I'll give them 12 questions in a form. I want them to fill them out. And again, I know they're not going to answer every single question, But by the time they answer at least half those questions, whatever they wanted me to do, they're rethinking that again. And then what we do is we do a recap session, and we'll get on a conference call for about an hour, and I'll go through like a growth matrix, I'll go through the growth strategies, I'll go through the lean canvas model, and I'm saying, okay, this is where you are, this is where you're trying to get, and this is what you asked me to do. Whatever you asked me to do is probably on step 4. Let's focus on what we should be doing. And in this case today, it was brand. Like, she needed to work more on her branding. She needed to work more on her copy, her strategy, on who she wanted to communicate to, who she wanted to talk to, versus just getting podcasts edited and creating podcast content.
You know what, you make a great point. When I talk to folks too, particularly, and I work with a lot of like service-based professionals, licensed professionals, folks who are, in the corporate world, like C-level folks or senior management people. And, a lot of their questions always revolve around, okay, KPIs. What are the key product indicators, production indicators that, are going to relate to me? And I say, you know what, that's a great question. I said, it's very, very personal to you, in the sense of I do this very same thing that you do. I have a very in-depth questionnaire that gives people, it gives me honestly the real insight of where they line up overall. And so many times, to your point, like why they originally made the call is very rarely, the core reason or the core things that they need first. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's a very, you see that all the time. So, when we talk about, podcasting though, right? Because at one point, I know you said, business is business, podcasting is podcasting. How is it that, you intermingle the two? And then I would also love to learn a little bit more about your own personal journey about, on how you hit the wall. Because so many of us, I think, particularly when we're just getting started and we throw those blinders on, and there's literally no, in our minds, any diversion is just pure recipe for disaster. We don't understand that, burnout is real, right? And things like that. So if you can, I know I touched on a couple of things there, but like spend some time, just imparting your wisdom and your experience on those topics.
Yeah, so I mean, just pulling back from the original question and going into this question, I mean, but it's about automation and just about podcasting, and talking about my story, and I'll be able to do all of them in one like clear statement, right? I had a stroke in 2018 because essentially I was a workaholic, and in my journey, I was trying to figure out things. I was a creative person, and then later on, I realized that I was half analytical and half creative, and that made me think about, okay, how do I learn more about strategy? How do I learn more about development? How do I learn more about business? And I went on this journey, and I had my company that was more of a design agency and graphic design, web design, social media, and so forth and so forth. And then I became a travel agent. Then I became an insurance agent. Then I got my Series 6 because my other side of the brain was like, okay, you need to understand how to manage money, how to move money around, how to get funding to help people with their website's presence. And I was like splitting myself in half, and I was juggling all these things at the same time. I mean, at one point in time, my actual insurance agency was up to 200 agents up and down the East Coast while running an actual marketing agency at the same time. So 2018, I had a stroke, and when I woke up in the hospital, I looked around, and my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, my parents were there, and my son, and I'm just kind of like, okay, what am I doing? At the time, I had primary full custody of my son, went through a divorce battle, all in this time frame as well, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So my girlfriend at the time, she was like, well, it's time for you to start branding yourself. You've been branding other people. You've been the guy behind the curtain, kind of referencing Wizard of Oz. And it's time for you to kind of step out in the hot air balloon and just float your sales. So it took me about a year of recovering, a year of me getting my right side of my body to work the way it originally worked. I'm a native New Yorker, so it took me a while for me to speak the way I'm speaking right now. I had a slow southern drawl for about 9 months. It drove me absolutely crazy. So now I actually speak like a New Yorker. A year later, I'm back on my feet, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to step in front of the limelight? What am I going to do to leave behind a legacy? How am I going to create all this information that I've gathered for the past 18 years and put it in a format that way my son, my daughter, grandkids, or any other entrepreneur that comes across my path can learn from me moving forward? And I was like, here's my time to shine. Do I become a YouTuber or do I become a podcaster? And at the time, I'm the guy behind the curtain, so I was like, yeah, YouTube is probably a little bit taking it too far. Let me go with podcasting because at least that way it's just my voice and it's not me. And
Mm,
then the first year, kind of going into the automation side of things, was the first year was just me figuring out like, what is a podcaster? What does podcasting really mean? And you hear this terminology, but you really don't understand what a podcaster is until you're really, I'll say, a year into podcasting. And when you figure out how to find the people for your show, when you figure out how to keep your show on schedule, when you figure out how to do editing, all these things are micro systems. And once you start figuring out, okay, these are systems, then I can automate some of these systems and I could leverage some of these systems. And once you get this compounding effect, and then year two, you're like, holy shit, now I could monetize this. Now I can show other people how to do it. Year three, you're like, okay, now I'm interviewing more bigger household name brands, a larger reach, way more content. You start recycling content from year one, and that's how you do it. Take these systems, grow them, impact them, and scale.
mm-hmm. That's interesting. So it's funny. We kind of had a similar paths in the sense of, I started. My wife was always the big advocate for me, where I was a lot like you, the guy behind the scenes, and very much right, left, middle down the road, right brain, left brain. But I'm going to say to you, like, I think looking at your backdrop versus mine, I think I'm probably more left than you, man, because if you're split and you're all this color and dynamic, I'm like, maybe I'm more left brain than I actually realize. It's so funny. Although I love to write, and that's maybe where it comes out from me. But it was that awakening, right? And sometimes you do need someone. Well, in your case, obviously it was your stroke, but also you had, your now wife kick you in the butt and say, hey, you gotta step into your own power. And
Yeah.
you touched upon something that I think is another huge takeaway for people who are really listening on what the entrepreneurial journey is about, being the self-employed journey is all about. And that is, you were spreading yourself so thin with the idea of, oh my gosh, I have to be able to do this, I have to be able to do that. Like you said, you
Hmm.
wind up getting your I guess it was your Series 6 license, and your for your insurance agency, um, with this anticipatory, I guess, concern that if you don't have them, that it's going to mean failure. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would think. I mean, one is being an overachiever, and two is kind of the one thing that if I could leave your audience with is figure out who is better at what you want to do than you could ever be, and either
Right,
partner with them, befriend them, or hire them.
right,
One of
right.
those three. And so for me, being the guy behind the curtain, and everyone was using me as the resource, being a resource, I wanted to make sure I had as many tentacles as I possibly can. And my tentacles were so split apart. I would get phone calls about leveraging contracts for an insurance for a company, and then I would get a call about DNS servers, and then I'll get a call about social media, and I'm like, the brain is designed to handle a lot, but if you think about like segmenting the brain on, I have to flip it on and off for every single call for different disciplines. It's no wonder I had a stroke. I mean, it was just kind of like your brain just can't handle that much at that magnitude for that long. I mean, I guess if you're looking at Tesla, then maybe he's probably the only person that I know right now that can juggle that many things and not have a stroke.
Yeah, no, well, he's an anomaly, that's for sure. But you
Yeah.
make a great point, because I know for myself, I know, I still do some legal work, very limited, because there's really no way for me to do it really an extended way, because I talk to people about this all the time, to exactly your point, making these seismic shifts that are so dramatic. Yes, you can, like you said, you can compartmentalize, or you can put your brain into, some way of just changing your focus. But to do things effectively, I'm a big advocate, and a lot of the folks who I talk to now. In fact, I had just talked to a client who I was with over a few days ago, where it's so many different directions. And I'm like, you've got to stop with all these different directions because it just wears you down. Focus on one thing. Get really, really good at it. Make that make it a revenue driver for you, right? I mean, because we all think that if we do all these things and then we create a little bit here, we create a little bit there, then it will possibly cumulatively create revenue. And I think overall, when you're on your own as a self-employed person or as an entrepreneur, you got to get like a laser, in my opinion. I mean, the phrase I use, and I don't know if I've never heard it before, but I call it purposeful intention. You've got to have this extreme focused, purposeful intention to drive, the ball into the end zone with respect to the one thing. And then once that happens, there'll be other opportunities that come up, but trying to do the build of multiple things simultaneously is just a recipe for failure, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I'm a living example of that. I mean, in today's world, I mean, I think a lot of people probably look at me and say I'm probably stretched thin, but they don't realize is that they had no idea how thinly I was stretched before. So like now with all my systems in place and my automation and everything is underneath one brand, like everything is underneath the Boss Uncaged brand. That in itself gives me the vision that I need. Like I'm not gonna be, oh, real estate. Real estate's calling me, but no, unless I could put a Boss Uncaged logo on that building, I'm not going into that space right now.
So what is the growth trajectory for you that you plan as far as, obviously you have your, Cerebral 360. Is that still running and operating and serving clients from the brand standpoint?
From the brand standpoint, but that's the beautiful part about Boss Uncaged is like I'm slowly dissolving that Cerebral 360. And now Boss Uncaged is becoming that. So Cerebral 360 was more a done for you service. Hey, you need a website? We can build it for you. Boss Uncaged is more of a boss minded situation to where, hey, yes, we could build you a website. Well, let's talk about why you need a website. And then when you want that website, instead of just doing that done for you service website, let's get you on the bandwagon to help market that website that you're looking for. Let's get you, I got contacts with SEO. Great. Let's get you like podcasts? Let's start up a podcast. You like course development? Let's help you with course development. So it's more of a strategy driven play. And then Boss Uncaged feeds into that versus Cerebral, which is done for you services.
I got you. So with Boss Uncaged, is that a driver? It's from a marketing component where the monetization comes from the brand awareness that people get through your podcast? Or is it where you're looking to ultimately monetize the podcast with respect to sponsorships or things like that? How do you see it growing? And I would love to even just share, based upon your experience, where you think the industry is going and how other folks can look at podcasting overall.
So for me, I mean, I'm a real big believer in having multiple pots of gold, right? And then kind of like diversification of your monetaries, right? So it doesn't mean that everything needs to come directly from the podcast, but the podcast could easily spawn out 7 different monetized situations. And an example of that is I have a Boss Uncaged Academy, right? And that academy, it's a monthly reoccurring revenue model to where I could help people understand. Like prime example, you asked me earlier on about how am I on all these platforms all at the same time and creating all this content. Well, it only makes sense if I'm going to teach someone, maybe I should put them into a situation to where other people are learning it with them at the same time, and they're just paying monthly dues to get access to that, right? In addition to that, well, I speak on stage, right? So if I can't sell from stage by default, people are opted into my list, and then I'm marketing to them other courses, other things that I may have. And then again, I also have a staff of 15 VAs underneath my belt as well that is kind of taking the Cerebral brand and pulling it apart. And now I'm going for, hey, do you need a VA for 10 hours a week? Do you need a VA for 40 hours a week? And then we can help you create your website, create your marketing, create your podcast, do your editing and everything else in that model versus doing the done for you service and pay one-time model that we had before.
Have you seen the VA industry? I mean, how have you seen it change over the years? I mean, I have my opinion, which I'd like to hear what your opinion has been with respect to how that industry's changed over the years, for the better, for the worse, more, more connected? What's your experience been?
I think it's like anything else. It's two sides to the coin, right? I mean, just like agencies. Like if you go back to Mad Men, right? I mean, agencies give them $1 million and they'll create you a video ad for television. That is kind of overdrawn into the point to where unless you're on Fortune 500 level, to where there's capital millions of dollars every single month that's being added to that marketing budget, it doesn't make sense. So if you're more of a small mom and pop, and I'm saying mom and pop, you could be earning $100 million annually and you can still be considered a mom and pop, but you need access to certain things and you may not want to hire someone full time. And again, freelancers are kind of, some freelancers are seasoned. Why would you try to go through trying to season someone when you could hire an agency that specializes in virtual assistants? That's where the model is right now and where it's going to continue to grow, because again, you could hire an agency and use one VA for 5 days and say, hey, I need someone to edit video. Hey, I need someone to actually edit a podcast. I need somebody to create me a logo, and go through this agency and switch out your VAs at any given time.
So are you plugging in through your Boss Uncaged brand to provide a VA agency as well, or is that something that I see. That's a good thing to know. So
That's the rollover, right? So think about it. I'm interviewing individuals that some of them are high profile, some of them are startup. We're having this conversation. We're making a connection. I'm not selling anything. They're not selling anything to me. At the end of the podcast, we may or may not have a friendship. But the bottom line is they have my email. I have their email. They're on my Facebook. I'm on their Facebook, LinkedIn, and the content is flowing back and forth. So if I decide to publish a book, if I just say, hey, raise my hand, and I send out an email, I'm more than likely they're going to be more inclined to open up that email.
Right.
And if that 100%. Email is talking to them about, hey, essay, the host of Boss Uncaged has a VA service that can help you do X, Y, and Z, they're more inclined to at least put it in their back pocket, or at least communicate, or at least say, let me set up a time to get on a conference call with him.
Right. And do you find with your clients, what's their level of familiarity with VAs? I mean, because it's been in the entrepreneurial space now for quite a while. I mean, I remember, probably back in like 2013, 2012, when I was getting more to do more of the social media type content and things like that. That was the first time I got introduced to this concept of VAs, but do you feel that, like, how folks say, for example, who are calling into you or coming from different, verticals, do you find that most of the people are familiar with the concept of VAs, or are you oftentimes educating them about what they are?
I think it's kind of like the whole NFT thing. Everyone kind of hears the terminology, but they're really not sure what it is. So being a growth strategist, it gives me opportunity to explain to them. And again, I've had agencies and I've been in agency world and I've worked with VAs and I've been in the VA world. And when I'm looking at the leveraging of it, I was like, well, think about if you're hiring an employee and you may have to pay that graphic designer $80,000 plus benefits plus everything else. Or you could hire us and maybe spend a fraction of that and not have to deal with all the extra stuff. And it also will be a complete write-off as well too. Even though employees can be a write-off, you're purchasing a service, which then you could write off 100%. So it's a different mentality and it's a different strategy.
And do you feel that people are getting they're getting more comfortable and trusting that VA process?
I think it comes down to the brand, right? I mean, if prime example, if Steve Jobs came to you and saying, hey guys, we have a new academy to teach people how to build computers, everyone's going to raise their hand. So building up your brand equity, in my case, as a podcast provider or as a podcast host, and then with the quantity and the quality that I produce on a regular basis, and then all the things that I'm posting on a given moment all the time, people start to look and be like, okay, well, he's actually doing it. So he knows what he's talking about, but he also has the branding and the growth strategy to back it up. So my agents that I have, I look at them just like I did with my travel agency or with my insurance agency. I look at them as agents. I don't really look at them as employees. I look at them as self-sustained agents, and then they all have their own specialties. So when I deliver the vision, I know exactly who to communicate that vision to get that job done.
Now, that's interesting. So with respect to your model client, what would you say is there a specific industry or certain type of business itself wherein it seems like it's such a good sweet spot for the client that you serve best?
Yeah, so I have an overlap of two clients. On one hand is speakers, coaches, course creators, content creators. That's one bubble. On the other side is more kind of like startup corporate. And right now, actually, my sales teams is working to target this particular individual. And I can tell you exactly who he is. He is John, and John is essentially owns a startup company. He owns a tech company, but he's not really tech savvy 100%. He's more of an investor. He understands if he puts money into this company, this SaaS platform can grow, and then he can sell that SaaS platform. So by me stepping into that space, understanding the finance, understanding the marketing, understanding the business, I can communicate with that individual very clearly, and then I can delegate to my team to help his team, his startup company, get to the next level. That is one of my secondary ideal clients.
That's good. That's very interesting stuff. So guys, we're talking to S.A. Grant. And as you can see, as if you've been hearing this, whether you're listening to it, on the podcast or watching it live, you can see and hear that, we're talking to somebody who is very seasoned in the entrepreneurial space, understanding what's required at an intimate level on how to juggle all of the aspects of being a business owner. And it's so important to have people like SA, people like myself on your team as you're going into this realm, or if you're hitting roadblocks, right? And, SA, even speaking with you, can you share, some of maybe one of the roadblocks that you hit, that you've had to overcome? Obviously you had this gigantic one, i.e. your stroke, right? But even just things that are more palatable or relatable to, say another entrepreneur out there, like a recent story, which, your collective experience kind of allowed you to get beyond, which maybe SA from 10 years ago would have exploded.
Yeah, I think primarily with entrepreneurs is which is different than corporate America. I mean, corporate America has money to burn to a certain extent, and entrepreneurs, our time and efforts need to be compounded a lot faster and a lot quicker. So perfection does not work as well, right? Corporate America, they can kind of put money into it to make it perfect, but as an entrepreneur, you have to get it done, test the market, get responses, see what people like, what they don't like. And that's how you can kind of turn and burn a product a lot quicker. I mean, think of it like Facebook. If Facebook didn't create what he did originally was inside of a college, and it was essentially a rating system. And then it grew from that, but he tested it in that particular market sector. And then it went from one
Right.
college to another college. And then it went from colleges to like universities, and it kept building and building, and then it became a world thing. But he didn't start out and say, you know what, I'm going to create this platform to integrate it on a global scale right away, right off bat. He may have had that in the foresight, but he targeted college students first, and it wasn't perfect. If you can go to like Time Machine and look at the original Facebook to where it is right now, night and day difference. Night and day difference. Functionality, look and feel, and just the algorithm runs completely different, and the algorithm changes on damn near hourly basis at this point. But then and now is two different things, and he understood that.
Right. Well, you make a great point, and I often talk to my clients about that, and folks who I speak to on the reg, and I implement myself. We particularly when you have someone coming from, say, a corporate background or a more professional background, where the mindset is still they're going into the entrepreneurial space, and then but the mindset is still very much geared towards a more traditional business framework. And people start applying, and I know I mean I've done it, where I would apply more traditional business principles, not being as nimble. I would, how many, and I'm sure so many the people I know, like, they start their business. What are the first thing they do is they just start spending money,
Hmm.
right? With the idea of, the build it and they will come model. Whereas an entrepreneur, you can't live in that space. You got to test it, see if it works, nurture it, fine tune it, right? And not really ever be totally, 100%. I always say commit to the process, obviously, but understand that the tactical approach is going to change, and even maybe what the ultimate product is going to change slightly based upon what feedback you get.
I totally agree with you. I mean, just from a podcasting standpoint, my first year, I was so concerned about having enough people to be on the show. And obviously, I've had businesses and I worked, so I had a large Rolodex. But even in the podcasting space, nobody knew me in that space. So you may have half your population is going to be like, sure, I'll support him. The other half of the population is like, I'll wait and see what he does first. So then you start to get concerned with, I want to make sure I can deliver a certain amount of episodes per month. So I started off with 2 episodes per month. And then by the time I got to about 6 months in, we went to 4 episodes per month. And then I was like, all right, cool. I got this. I'm leveraging it. I can stay on this schedule. And then year 2 came to, and I was like doing 3-4 episodes a day. And it got to the point to where now we're probably backlogged by 150 episodes versus we just released our 130th episode. So like now, like getting the right people on my show is not really a concern anymore. And then you start to look at the systems behind that. You start realizing that there's podcast recruiters and there's online platforms, and you learn about the industry. And it was like, why was I concerned about getting people when there's billions of people? There's almost impossible for you not to get someone on your show.
100%. I know I will be, again, first to raise my hand. I started a podcast back in 2018 and I shelved it because I didn't have the belief. And I remember I hired somebody who was going to help me launch it, and I spent a ton of money, right? And it was all, so much of it was, the process was manufactured, or the complexity of it all was in a way kind of manufactured in my head, because I was still very much of that mindset, which you mentioned earlier. If it's not perfect, can't do it. And it put me way behind the 8 ball until recently. I mean, I just started this just a few months ago, right? With the idea where I literally got to the point where I'm like, you know what? Because I have my VA, and I was initially starting with the idea of, hey, can I get on people's podcasts? And it was fine. I got a chance to meet you and a few other people, but it was fading quickly. The minute I said, screw it, I'm starting my own. I got within one afternoon, I was up, running, rocking and rolling. And then, and I realized, hey, there are services out there that are affordable, that I can bring people on. And now we're booked through August, right? So I think the thing is, and to the point, your point is that, we tend to put so many self-imposed obstacles as far as what has to happen in order to actually make it work. When just get started, it's going to be clumsy. It's going to be whatever. Who cares? Just get out there.
Yeah, I think the more clumsier you are, the better. Because, I mean, you got to think about it. Like, people enjoy seeing your journey. And it kind of goes back to storytelling. They like to see when your camera was grimy and you had no merch and your lights were jacked up. And then they fast forward a year or 2 later, and it's kind of like, wow, I remember when this guy or gal was like in the basement, in the dungeon, and they were like, they didn't even have a camera. They couldn't even afford a camera. So, I mean, like, I think that builds the loyalty as well.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know we're getting close to wrapping up, because I like to keep it close to 30 minutes. So do me a favor, if you could, just take a few moments right now to just, talk to the folks, tell them, again, how they can connect with you, who you're looking to serve. If you have anything that you would want to offer, here's your shot. Yeah.
So to communicate with me, I mean, it's pretty easy. You could just go into Google and type in Boss Uncaged, and we should dominate the first 3 to 4 pages. Like that. If that's not there, then you need to let me know about it. But, and then second to that would just be sagrant.com, and that's kind of like my catch-all. There's some Boss Uncaged on there. There's some growth strategy on there. There's some general marketing. As far as free things, if you go to sagrant.com, on that homepage, there's a quick little form right there. You can fill it out, and then I think I deliver like a 7-day program that kind of helps you with growth strategies. And then by all means, if you want to, I would definitely go to podcast.bossuncaged.com and listen to the podcast. Let me know what you think.
Yeah. So guys, and then also, if you are looking for how to, how to scale your business and leverage, as SA was saying, like a VA agency, he's a good guy to connect with. So obviously I put all the connections and all the contact information in the show notes. SA, thanks for being on the show today. I really appreciate it very much. And guys, thank you for tuning in. And again, Mike Coluzzi here, Pro Tips to Grow Your Biz. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.